Hey guys, welcome to Moose's Gunsmithing. Well, really Moose's Machinery. We're on YouTube, but this is a Savage Model 1921. These are a fairly rare shotgun. Production numbers put these between 6,500 and 13,000 made total. And this is about a 100-year-old shotgun. This is a 4-digit serial number, so fairly early in production. Parts don't exist for these, and I wanted to make this video as a lesson in learning where to stop. And I did not take the fore end off of this so I could do a good job rebluing the magazine tube. What I did on the magazine tube is I rust blued it and poured boiling water over it a couple of times to convert the rust into a more stable form. Now, as you can clearly see in the video, there's some modeling. Now, the trade-off on this, and we're going to talk about another situation on this particular firearm where we had to make some creative repairs, is don't take risks taking things apart. Now, this looks significantly better. This looks like it was pulled out from under the back seat of Grandpappy's truck that's been sitting in a barn for 30 years when it came in. It was rough. Now it's much better. I didn't go crazy polishing it. I spent about an hour on the receiver. I left in some of the deeper scratches. My experience with Savage firearms of this vintage is they do have some scratches in them lengthwise on the receiver. That's very typical. Now, why would I do this? One, because I like to do period correct looking repairs, and two, we were on a budget, so this guy paid me for an hour of polishing on the whole gun. He got an hour of polishing on the whole gun. This thing was deeply pitted and looked honestly like hammered dog shit, so that's what we did. But what we also ran into on this is the ejector had broken. From what I understand, it's a fairly common issue on these guns. It's one of their most common failure points. And based on looking at the design, this and firing pins, I think, is what kills the guns. I actually cut a piece of spring steel and brazed it back together. I don't know if that is a factory repair, but at some point in the life cycle of this gun, someone else knew that ejector was broken. And there's a piece of music wire brazed, acting as the spring side on it. Now, that didn't function. I'd called the customer, told him what was going on, and said, give me a couple weeks, I'll try and see what I can do on this. I wanted to give him that update, kind of set the expectation here that if I run into stuff like this, I'm going to call you about it, tell you what's going on, and make sure we're on the same page. Now, I think this is going to be a decent repair. I'm not super confident in it, and I'm going to communicate that to the customer because this is already broken. I repaired a broken part. I can't make guarantees on how long it stays functional. And with the parts availability on this type of shotgun, I do not take risks. I don't take risks taking apart forearms. I don't want to split this and make another 3 or 4 hours of work for myself if it splits in such a way where I can glue it back together. And I don't want to delay this job for months until that gets sorted out. So that's one of those things. As a business owner, it's really, really important to make sure customers are on the same page with you and stuff like this, which is why I called this customer and told him what was going on. Now, this is a really interesting shotgun. I'm probably not going to see one of these for a long, long time, if ever. You know, what you learn in this business is, at least in my shop, I do get a lot of the rarer firearms that other shops will look at and say, I'm not going to touch that, I don't want to deal with it, this and that reason. And I'm kind of like, I'll take it, but I'm going to charge you for it. Because ultimately, business is business. Now, this became a minor headache. It's not a major migraine, and that's kind of a win for everyone involved. But one of the important things to walk away from this video, if you're a customer or a business owner and you do any customer relations, set expectations, communicate those to customers as best you can, and don't surprise people. Now, I did surprise this guy because I called him with an issue. but I don't surprise them at the end of the job. My policy is if I go 20% over the estimate, I contact you. Now, in some cases, I don't contact you if I'm 20% over. In this case, I'm going to be like 5% over my estimate, but this could have created major delays. So I think communication with customers is pretty important. Don't play games and obfuscate with people. Now, I put this back together just so I can function test it. I'm probably going to polish the bolt just so it looks better. But I'm debating leaving it because right now, if you don't know any better, this really looks like a survivor gun that hasn't been re-glued. And that's one of the things I like to go for when I'm doing restoration work like this, is really obfuscate the wear and tear on the firearm. Make it look as original as possible. Now, we had discussed that. He didn't really expect this to look factory new, so that's just not what happens in this case, and I'm kind of glad. I think this gun turned out very well considering where I started. It looked horrid, and I'm hopeful this customer and I can, both walk away from this transaction happy. Hopefully this firearm works. I will suspect it has ejection issues. I'm going to have the conversation with them and say you need to order 2.5-inch shells. They're not in stock. What I did is I used dummy shells to test function cycling, and I used an Aguila mini shell to fire the firearm. Aguila mini shells do not cycle in this firearm, so please understand that this firearm is not safe for 2 3/4 inch ammunition. This is one of the very last couple of years of American firearms where they weren't 2 3/4 inch chambers. I think this is like a 2 5/8. Yes, you can probably shoot a 2 3/4 inch shot shell through this safely. I would absolutely not recommend it, and I would recommend purchasing 2 3/4 inch 2.5 inch shells and not using 2 3/4 inch shells for safety. However, I can only make that recommendation to customers. I can't force them to do anything, so I'm going to put that note on the work order and communicate that with the customer, and ultimately he makes his own choice. But I don't want to get sued because someone did something unsafe. So I hope you guys thought this video was interesting. I'm trying to keep it short and sweet. These are just interesting situations to look at, and I think this is a side of the gunsmithing business people don't necessarily think about.